Is this all the inheritance? How disappointing. This is just pocket change. I don't need this. You can have it.
Mary let out an exaggerated sigh and stood up as if she wasn't the least bit sad about her husband's passing. That's not a nice thing to say, Mary. What do you think a person's life is worth?
Money,
she said with a sinister smile. It was like she was the devil herself. I doubt Mary could even imagine what was about to happen to her. My name is Lisa Collins, and I just turned 55 this year. I have 2 sons. My eldest, James, just turned 35. My younger son has a free-spirited personality and doesn't conform to societal norms. Not surprisingly, he's been traveling abroad and isn't in the US right now. I occasionally receive postcards from him, so I know how he's doing. But the real problem is James. He's diligent and law-abiding, but he can be inflexible and rigid in his ways. Because of this, whenever he dated someone, the relationship often ended in an argument.
I don't think I'm cut out for dating, let alone marriage.
One New Year's, James came home looking serious and asked for advice. He knew his strict personality often led to conflicts with his girlfriends. I wanted to reassure him, but as a mother, I had to be honest. I know you're a kind and sincere person, but you've always been strict with yourself and others. Remember how you were with your younger brother? Sometimes you argue because of that, even though it's one of your good traits. Maybe if you could be a bit more flexible, things would be different. My words seemed to have a big impact on James. He said he often scolded his subordinates because he tended to think from his own perspective.
But now, by considering their point of view, I've improved my relationships at work. You were right, Mom. I was too strict with myself and others. I've started taking more time to think things over. I've even started dating someone new.
The woman he mentioned would later become my daughter-in-law, Mary.
Nice to meet you, Mrs. Collins. I'm Mary. I met James through my father's business. He's a wonderful son.
Mary smiled gracefully, her hand lightly touching her mouth.
Mary is a CEO's daughter. She's not particularly interested in business or management.
I want to be a stay-at-home wife someday. Isn't that every woman's dream? I guess you wouldn't understand since you've always worked, Mrs. Collins.
The way she said that, with a slight tone of superiority, made me feel uneasy. But it was our first meeting, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I told myself it was just a difference in perspectives. I've worked while raising my children, and I'm still working now. Wanting to be a stay-at-home wife is a personal choice, and it's not something to judge or lecture about. But it seemed like Mary had different thoughts on the matter. James seemed completely captivated by her gentle demeanor. He's a serious guy and might be naive about a woman's hidden side. If Mary had any ulterior motives towards James, I was ready to oppose their marriage. But Mary only seemed hostile towards me, treating James kindly.
Mary isn't interested in power or status. She's currently working at a bank. Although she says she wants to be a housewife, I don't think she plans to quit her job anytime soon.
He really believed that, but I could see the real meaning behind Mary's words.
If I wanted to, I could choose to be a stay-at-home wife, but you, Mrs. Collins, definitely can't.
That's probably what she was thinking. It's just my speculation, but it seemed like she brought up being a stay-at-home wife just to make a point. Eventually, James and Mary officially got engaged and later informed me that they had filed their marriage papers.
It feels too formal to call you Mrs. Collins. From now on, I'll call you Lisa.
I think I prefer that too, Mary. At that moment, there was a spark between us. After James got married, life continued as usual for a while. I woke up, got ready for work, managed my team, and before I knew it, it was lunchtime. Meetings with clients and various tasks filled my day. After a long, tiring day, I returned home to find James and Mary waiting outside my house. What are you two doing here? They both turned to look at me, James looking on the verge of tears, while Mary comforted him. What happened?
Our apartment caught fire. A neighbor's cigarette started it. We lost everything, including valuables, left in the house.
I see. Earlier I thought I heard sirens in the distance. That must have been for your apartment. Mary, who had been unfazed before, seemed slightly shaken by the loss of their home. So they came here because they had nowhere else to go. In that case, you can stay here until things settle down. I truly meant it, with no hidden intentions. But Mary seemed displeased and raised her eyebrows.
What do you mean by that? Are you saying you're letting us stay out of pity?
I didn't mean it like that. It felt like she was twisting my words. I was exhausted after a long day, so maybe my tone was a bit curt. But Mary's reaction felt like she was nitpicking. Meanwhile, James seemed too shocked by the fire to pay attention to our conversation. I decided to cook dinner for them and let them take a bath. While James was in the bath, Mary looked at her phone and asked me a question.
I heard your husband passed away. You raised 2 kids on your own. but everything seems halfway done, probably because you were a single mother. James is the way he is because you didn't enforce enough discipline, don't you think?
I don't think it's to that extent. James was sometimes overly focused, forgetting his surroundings. But recently he's been more considerate of others and values you, which is why you two got married. I wondered if it was appropriate for Mary to complain about her husband's flaws to his mother. Sorry, James is clumsy but kind. But if you have so many complaints about him, why did you marry him?
I just thought it would be okay to marry James. Marriage is all about momentum, right?
Momentum? It sounded like she was more interested in the status of being married than James himself. I wondered if I should have opposed this marriage. But James and Mary seemed to have a good relationship, and before I knew it, Mary was pregnant.
I'm almost in my second trimester. I didn't notice because I didn't have morning sickness. It's great to have a child, isn't it? I still show up at the bank, but I leave early due to feeling unwell.
She contradicted herself, saying she had no morning sickness but using pregnancy as an excuse to leave work early. I guess it's fine if she's feeling unwell, but she seemed perfectly healthy.
I'm off to maternity yoga with my friends. For dinner, I'd like a pasta with spicy cod roe cream sauce.
Mary left without hesitation. Her behavior didn't stop there.
I've decided to take some time off work.
One day she casually said this while lounging in her pajamas watching TV. Taking time off? Is something wrong? I was genuinely concerned and asked.
It's none of your business why I'm taking time off. You're annoying. Just go to work.
I thought they would move out once they found a new apartment, but that wasn't the case. I didn't say anything, but I felt frustrated. When they first arrived, their apartment had just burned down, and then Mary found out she was pregnant. If I tried to kick them out now, it would make me look bad. Having gone through childbirth twice myself, I understood Mary's feelings to some extent, so I decided to continue living together for the time being. A few months later, Mary gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Emily.
Are you sure you don't want to go?
James asked me while fastening his seatbelt in the driver's seat. Yes, I heard some women don't like their mothers-in-law visiting right after giving birth. Mary's probably tired, so it's better if I don't go. I'll let you and her family handle things for now. I responded, and James, looking a bit disappointed, started the car. I was eager to see my first grandchild, Emily, but I wasn't sure how Mary would react if I showed up. I figured she'd come home soon enough, so I decided to wait. After a few days in the hospital, Mary came home with Emily.
Buy diapers for Emily right away.
She immediately commanded me, as if it was a given. I thought you'd say that, so I already bought some.
How do you know what size of brand?
I got a variety of samples. Mary's eyes widened, staring at me. She probably planned to keep asking for different things until she got her way. I could easily predict her behavior, so I prepared in advance. Mary clicked her tongue and retreated to her room, muttering about breastfeeding. Watching her go, I let out a deep sigh. And so began the chaotic days. Mary, now on maternity leave, reduced her work hours significantly. James, more dedicated to his job now that he was a father, was spending more time away from home. While it's good that he's working hard, shouldn't he also be at home to support his wife? Most men are taking paternity leave these days. In fact, 2 men in my office recently took 3 months off for paternity leave. I mentioned this to James, but he said he couldn't afford to take time off.
We get bonuses at work, and if I become a manager, my salary will increase significantly. Then I can provide a more comfortable life for Mary, Emily, and you, Mom. I'm doing my best right now, so I hope you can look after Mary and Emily for me.
And with that, the conversation ended. I felt a bit of disconnect, but it was their decision. Sighing deeply, I tried to let go of my frustrations, but the frustration soon returned.
Oh, Lisa, I borrowed your credit card for a bit.
Mary showed me a luxury baby stroller. Borrowed? How is this a borrowing if you're telling me after the fact? And that stroller looks expensive. I wasn't an expert, but I recognized the brand logo, indicating it wasn't cheap. She had taken my card without permission and bought it.
We're family, so I thought it was okay. Besides, it's not illegal between relatives. Think of it as a favor for your precious granddaughter.
Using Emily was a low blow. I didn't like Mary, to be honest, but Emily was my son's child, my grandchild. Seeing her sleeping peacefully in that stroller, I told myself it was for her. But all the things I'd been tolerating were starting to push my limits. If Mary did anything more, I feared my anger would reach a point I couldn't control. James seemed as busy as ever, and I hadn't received a postcard from my younger son in a while, like the calm before a storm. My worst fears came true in the most terrible way. James? James! When I rushed into the hospital room, James was unconscious, hooked up to multiple IVs. I had gotten a call just 30 minutes earlier. I didn't recognize the number, but I felt a sense of dread and answered immediately. It was one of James's subordinates calling to say he had collapsed and been taken to the hospital. I dropped everything and headed to the hospital. Mary wasn't there yet, and when I tried calling her, she didn't answer. Sweat started to form on my forehead. My late husband had also died suddenly one day. His family had a history of strokes, and he always said he might inherit the same fate. A few days later, he did, so I was always worried James might have inherited that as well. Unfortunately, fate can be cruel. James suffered a stroke, and the doctor said he might only have a week left. As I grieved, I noticed an unsettling presence entering the room. I thought this would happen sooner. Mary was dressed in a knee-length dress with oversized sunglasses. Despite everything, she still managed to draw attention to herself. Mary had been on maternity leave and had left Emily in daycare to refresh herself. I didn't mind her needing time for herself, but her attitude about James's condition was appalling. Until now, I'd kept my composure, but seeing Mary like this, I finally reached my limit. The things I had been holding back were now pouring out. "What are you thinking?" I stood up, my voice low and rumbling. For a moment, Mary flinched, but then quickly returned to her usual demeanor.
He often complained of headaches. I thought he should see a doctor, but he kept saying he was fine. Then he collapsed, and I thought, I told you so.
"Do you have any compassion at all? Your husband might not survive, and this is how you act?" My voice shook with emotion, but Mary replied with complete disinterest.
It's natural that this happens to everyone eventually. Besides, I come from a wealthy family, so it doesn't matter if he's gone. Emily is too young to remember him anyway.
Mary's words were so heartless that I felt the strength drain from my body, and I collapsed on the floor. Seeing this, Mary scoffed and left the room without even looking at James or checking his condition. Judging by her behavior, I doubted she'd even bother with the funeral arrangements. I decided I would give James a proper send-off as his mother. Mary, who had done nothing, argued that it was a waste of money.
What's the point of spending money on a funeral? It's not like James was famous. A small service should be enough. What's more important is securing Emily's inheritance.
What are you talking about? Mary had shown no intention of spending a single dime on James's funeral. I wondered if using my own money to give my son a proper farewell was a waste. Was it wrong to use my own funds for my son's funeral? I was so confused. In the end, I organized James's funeral myself. Mary didn't help at all and left immediately after the funeral. It wasn't just disrespectful, it was heartless. I wanted to kick her out right then, but Emily was still young. But Mary didn't stop there. After the burial, she started discussing the inheritance.
What's with this pitiful amount? This is all his savings? Can't believe I put up with all this for nothing. I don't want any of it. You can have it, Mrs. Collins.
Mary tossed aside James's bank book in disgust. That was it for me. I picked up the bank book, forcing a smile onto my face. "Let's just cut all ties then, shall we?" She responded casually.
"I was already planning on it." This is so disappointing. James worked so hard and this is all he had to show for it? What a failure. I chose the wrong guy. I don't want any of this junk.
After she left, I received a letter from her saying she was renouncing her inheritance and leaving Emily with me. Mary never really changed. She was always selfish and difficult, but after James passed, she only cared about his inheritance and even through his bank book. Before, she masked her true nature with a smile, but now, there was no doubt. The woman I had seen last was no longer Mary. She was a woman whose soul was consumed by money. She pretended to care about Emily, but when the time came, she abandoned her. I decided to take care of Emily from then on. It's been years since then. Emily is now growing up and talking a lot. I managed to find childcare and return to work, balancing work and raising Emily. I've thought about Mary every day since. Today is the day Mary finally gets her comeuppance. On a scorching hot day, I went to a branch of a bank. As the automatic doors opened, a cheerful welcome echoed from the employees. One of them saw me and gasped.
"What are you doing here, Lisa?"
"You have no right to call me by my first name," I said sharply, and Mary shrank back. Her colleagues stared curiously. I announced my purpose. "This branch is smaller than I expected. I'd like to close my account and withdraw $2 billion. The bank fell silent. "Did you not hear me? I'd like to close my account. I can't trust a bank with an employee like her." The manager, who hadn't met me before, came rushing over, sweating nervously.
"Excuse me, are you Mrs. Collins?"
"Yes, I am. I appreciated the former manager's assistance, but I'm not happy with the situation here."
"Is there something we can assist you with?"
I continued speaking, ignoring Mary. It's more of a personal matter. Mary here is my late son's ex-wife. When my son passed away, she was more concerned about money than him, and she left her daughter with me. Banks rely on trust. I can't trust Mary, so I'd like to close my account and transfer my $2 billion to another bank. I stated confidently. I was telling the truth. The manager turned even paler.
I apologize for any inconvenience. Mary, apologize.
Mary had always looked down on us, thinking James was beneath her. That's why she got caught off guard. You never tried to understand us. You assumed your family's wealth was rare. That's why you became so unpleasant. I pointed out, and Mary turned red.
So what? I'm sure your money was just inherited from your husband.
The manager tried to stop her, horrified.
How dare you speak to Mrs. Collins like that? She's a successful businesswoman who built her empire from scratch.
What?
Mary realized that my company was larger than her father's. I smiled. He's right. My late husband was an ordinary employee, but I started my own business in college. It was a great success, and now I own over 20 companies nationwide. By the way, your father's company is one of my business partners. I'm meeting him later today. I might just mention this little incident. I heard you've been disowned. When you met James, you were already estranged from your father. You bragged about your family, but it all seemed off. I guess you weren't allowed to work for your father because you've been disowned. Mary's face turned pale. I've been involved in many businesses, including external auditing. Mary, you made over 1,000 unauthorized stock trades for personal gain, using inside information. This was discovered during an investigation. I'm the one who discovered it. You've been using James's name to trade for profit. Isn't that right? The manager collapsed to his knees, and Mary turned white, trembling. Over the past year, while investigating Mary, I discovered her misconduct. She had used internal information from the bank's business partners for her gain. I told you, banks rely on trust. I can't keep my money in a bank with such a dishonest employee. Mary screamed.
James only had a few $1,000s in savings. What are you talking about?
That's true, but he also invested in real estate. When I took custody of Emily, you renounced your claim to any of James's assets, didn't you? You said real estate was a burden and didn't want his old car. At the time you agreed, saying you didn't want anything. It's been over a year since she gave up her claim. The properties James left were valuable after a little renovation. They're fully occupied now, and the rental income goes to Emily's future. It's too late for regrets, Mary. If you had cared for James and noticed his health declining, things might have been different. James is clumsy, but always believed in you until the end. When he briefly regained consciousness before passing, the first thing he did was look for you and Emily. That's what you abandoned. Mary fell to the ground, sobbing, but no one in the room felt sorry for her. Only contempt and disdain. Mary was later fired due to her unethical traits. I'll keep my account here because of the manager's sincerity. The manager looked relieved. I had no intention of dragging innocent people down with her. Mary was the one who needed to face the consequences. Mary was blacklisted in the financial sector and now works low-paying jobs. Her father's company later apologized to me, and our business relationship remains intact. Mary was the only one who lost everything and fell into misery. Emily has grown up a lot and now attends elementary school. I see glimpses of James in her smile. She's now being raised as my younger son's child. My younger son married quietly after James's death. He met a Japanese musician abroad who couldn't have children due to health reasons, but wanted to be with him regardless. They decided to raise Emily together, and I supported their decision. Family comes in many forms. To Emily, I am both grandmother and mother, a unique and irreplaceable family member. Believing that, I continue to work hard every day, cherishing the sight of my granddaughter's smiling face.